panel consists of 10 football players, 8 basketball players, and 5 baseball players. Suppose that 2 people are selected at random. What is the probability that 2 baseball players are selected? And a separate question, what is the probability that a football player, then a basketball player is selected? All right, so here we see that there's 23 players total, right? So there's 23 players total, and we are selecting two people at random. Now, of course, because we're selecting people and each of these 23 people are, unique people, we can assume that there's no replacement here, right? So we're not like, after we pick the first person, we're not putting him back into the panel and then selecting one more, right? So it's not, of course, automatically assumed that we're going to pick one person, right? And then we're going to pick the second person after that, okay? So let's answer the first question here, right? What is the probability that 2 baseball players are selected? Okay, so remember, what has to happen if 2 baseball players are selected? The first one is baseball player, and then the second one is a baseball player. Well, we know that there's 23 players total. We know that there are 5 baseball players, right? So the probability that the first player is a baseball player is 5 over 23, right? But then what is the probability that the second person selected is a baseball player? Okay, now remember, out of these 23 players, one of them has been picked, right? And we know that that person was a baseball player. So we know that there are 22 players left, but there are also 4 baseball players left. Okay, so 5 over 23 is a probability that the first person taken was a baseball player. And the 4 over 22 represents a probability that the second person is also a baseball player, but given that the first person was a baseball player as well. Right, so if you multiply these together, we get 20 over 506. You can leave it like that, but we can also reduce this, right? 10 over 253. Okay. So then what is the probability that a football player was selected first and then a basketball player? Okay. And once again, we're assuming that once that first person is selected, this person is not not thrown back into the panel. Okay. So then, well, what is the probability then that the first person picked is a baseball player? A football player. Well, there's 10 football players, right? So that's going to be 10 out of 23. Right? You can imagine there's 23 names in a hat, or 23 different objects, right? So the probability that you're going to select a football player, right? There's 10 football players out of the 23 people total. Okay? But then what has to happen, right? Then a basketball player will be picked second, right? But remember, that's assuming that the football player was taken first. So we know that there's 22 people left, but right, we know that there are 8 basketball players remaining, right? So the first person selected was a football player, and then the second person selected here was a basketball player. Okay? We multiply these together, we get 80 out of 506, which we can reduce down to 40 over 253.